Hello, team, and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is Ukraine War News Update, second part. Please check out the first. For the 2nd of August 2023, we'll go to the Frontline update. And as I say quite often, at the moment, not a massive amount of information coming out from the front lines, but we'll try and make some. Sense out of it. Right, in the Crimea axis, some adjustments. So this is up in the northeast, though a little bit further down from Kupiansk and from Svatova. Here, down in Crimea, the initial Russian push towards Torska is smaller than initially thought. So, if you remember, there was some footage that came out to suggest someone was shelling someone in the Torska urban area or the edge of that settlement. And there were thoughts that, oh my goodness, it means that Russians are there. That's Ukrainian shelling, and then the video footage was taken down, and then a load of mappers were like, right, Russians have advanced to here. And then over the subsequent week, it was like, okay, no, maybe they haven't advanced to there. And actually, it seems quite quiet there, so on and so forth. And I think there were just too many pro-Russians getting excited about that. And that's being kind of scaled back. And it might be that subsequently, actually, the Russians have been pushed back there as well in the Torska area. I don't know. The area in the Crimea forest under Russian control, on the other hand, is larger than thought, and that is probably a result of the Russians pushing quite a lot in the forest area. There is intense fighting in the Serebyansky forest. The Ukrainian defensive positions hold in general, according to no reports. The Russian offensive operations appear to be weakening. Yeah, there is sort of small amounts of activity up and down this whole front line, and not too much information on what's going on in Karmazianivka area west of Svatova. Here we have more claims about what's going on in the Serebyansky forest. In the, or as it says, Kremensky forest here, the Russians have carried out and are conducting offensive operations in several directions, northwest of the village of Dubrova. An assault armored group of the Russian armed forces advanced to combat positions on the outskirts of the forest. The fights continue. The situation is under revision. To the south, the Fraternal Armed Forces of Ukraine inflicted a fire defeat on the infantry of the Russian armed forces of the Russian Federation and a stronghold. Again, really general, might not be true. The sort of thing that Russians claim as well. Both sides sort of claim these. Oh, we've hit them, destroyed a stronghold, but it's all kind of quite vague. Going further down south to Bakhmut, the Ukrainian military controls at least the southern part of the dense planting in the south of Bakhmut and the north of Klishchivka. What that means is there's a kind of forest area just to the north of Klishchivka. We had an attack here before, the result of which was unknown. Now footage has appeared that confirms the presence of the armed forces of uh, Ukraine in the landing in that area. Now that was actually what I reported yesterday, or very close to. That's the area where the Ukrainians have taken up to the railway line that Andrew Perpetua noted. This looks to be just following in line with what Andrew Perpetua said yesterday. And then we have here, quote, this is from the General Staff, the Ukrainian General Staff. During the conduct of offensive assault operations by Ukrainian forces, the enemy was forced to retreat from positions in the area south of Avdiivka. So this is going down to Avdiivka now. At the same time, the enemy made unsuccessful attempts to restore lost positions north and west of Klishchivka and back up to Bakhmut, as well as the northwest of Kurdyamivka. So that's the claims that the Russians counterattacked there. The claims yesterday, if you remember, that the Russians didn't make a single counterattack near Bakhmut, which was quite unlike them. But anyway, I'll give you more details, more robust details of what's going on in the Frontline update, which will be out next. Now here, okay, so not really a lot that I can work out taking place in the Bakhmut area. We'll go on to the south here to Zaporizhia and Donetsk. So here, Feher Jr. says, Zaporizhia and Donetsk, the defense forces of Ukraine continue to conduct an offensive operation in the Melitopol and Berdyansk directions, are entrenched at the reached borders and carry out counter-battery measures. So that's more to say that they are entrenching rather than moving forward. Staromilnivka direction, that's south of, actually that's this area, south of Staromilska that they've taken. Moving on towards Staromilnivka. The armed forces of Ukraine improved the tactical situation in the area of the village of Staromylsky and achieved partial success in the direction of Shakhtarsky. Um, so that is, I guess, around the circle here where they're saying there. Um, the enemy attempted to restore the lost position east of Staromylsky. This is in the Urzhiny direction without success. Yeah. The fighting continues in the direction of the Volodina and the village of Pryutne in different directions. There are some claims of Russian counterattacks east of Pryutne in this kind of salient there that I was talking about yesterday, the bit of a bridgehead that the Russians have further to the northeast of Pryutne. And then in the Yorokiv direction, so that's Malatok, Machka, Robotna sort of area. In the Yorokiv direction of the Zaporizhia front, on the outskirts of the village of Robotna and Verbova, the situation of the Russians is getting more serious every day. The lack of artillery ammunition, the lack of reserves, and problems with the protection of the flanks of the defending units, as also reported yesterday by the British intelligence. The Russians' desperate counterattacks bring no positive results for them. Indeed, according to the latest analysis, the Ukrainian army is advancing from east to west in this direction. So it's a very positive outlook of what's going on there. I don't know that it's going to be entirely that positive. Just take everything with a pinch of salt, of course. To the Vasilivka front, we have, so as you can see in the area we're just talking about, Robotna, no reports is claiming that there are some advances all in that sector. After attacks in recent days towards Vrvova and Novopokrivka, Novopokopivka, the Ukrainians have consolidated new territory. There's a preliminary information that the Ukrainians have passed Robotna from the east and arrived at the defense line of Novopokrovivka, though it is unconfirmed. So you've got, by the way, that's this Novopokrovivka, but you've also got Novopokrovka. I could cry. It's too early. I had a late night. I went to see Oppenheimer last night. Really enjoyed it. The soundscape was amazing, but my brain is really struggling today. Anyway, the Ukrainians have been trying to attack south of Novopokrovka, but they're also trying to move towards, around the outskirts of Robotna, not necessarily go through Robotna, but to flank it from the east and west to get to the settlements further to the south. And that's kind of what I think No Reports is saying there. This is from P*11 saying, quote, the guy, and this is from a Russian source, the guy's pee in a jar so as not to stick out of the shelter. This is going back, sorry, this is in the wrong place. This is going back to Urzhiny, which is just to the east of, where do we have it? East of Staromylsky. So you've got Staromylsky there in the Velikan of a Silka salient and or sector, and Urzhiny is just there. This source is just saying it's really difficult. They're under so much pressure that they don't even want to poke their heads out of whatever safety they're in. And in Urzhiny, the lack of Russian artillery leaves the Russians anxious. It's just a matter of time before they either die or leave. This person says so. The full claim here is I talked today with one old comrade. He and his unit are in harvest, that's Urzhiny, and repulse enemy attacks. Of course, I didn't hear anything new for myself, but how an individual person bears a military load is always new and interesting. Quote, at first it's scary, then fear starts to annoy you, and then it doesn't give a damn about the danger. And the guys pee in a jar so as not to stick out of the shelter once again. And I go upstairs and feel great and waited out the arrival. Then it will fly overhead, and there is no hiding, no hiding. The most difficult thing is to live without a normal counter battery, all with one voice. Both my Vostokites, so from the Vostok battalion, and allied partners say impotence in the face of artillery is a most difficult feeling. This is the idea that they just, and this has been multiply attested to, they just don't have very good or indeed existent at all counter battery fire, counter battery efforts. There's no ability to hit the artillery back. And we've kind of seen this as well with dug in Ukrainian artillery that doesn't particularly shoot and scoot. Just set it up. We're not going to be hit by counter battery fire because it'd be, I mean, that's the ideal situation because if you're going to fire with say an N777 howitzer and you fire like 3 shots, and then you have to move, and then fire 3 shots, and move, then fire 3 shots. That's a really massive effort. So it's great if you can just park up, fire, 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 fire. Don't have to move. Just spend all day firing because you know that you're not going to get hit by counter battery fire. Okay, so Russian channels are now reporting that the intensity of fighting in and HIMARS artillery MLRS strikes in the Orikhiv direction has increased. For the first time, the Swedish supplied Archer is mentioned by Russians. So we are seeing mention of those Archers, these self-propelled howitzers. We'll come on to look at those in a second, are being used on the front. They have really good range and they can shoot and scoot really effectively. So they are a decent bit of kit being brought to bear here. And so all those distance munitions are having an effect possibly in the Robotna area to the advantage of the Ukrainians. And again, it's this case of attriting until you get to a breaking point where the Russians just don't have the counter battery, they don't have the ability to defend their troops. The troops pull out, the Ukrainians pull in, rinse and repeat. But at some point, there's just it's not the Russians might move back to a second line of defense, but that line of defense has no artillery to defend it either. So you get this overwhelming, suddenly you are able to break through because there isn't the ability to defend those positions. There's only sort of mines that really are keeping the Ukrainians at bay. So it's waiting for that point. Right. Moving on to military aid now. Still no training plan for Ukrainian pilots on the F-16 that's been agreed on. The US, reports CNN, the US is still waiting for European officials to submit a final plan. So there were all these initial ideas that the Americans were dragging their heels with not giving the okay to F-16s. And then, well, that happened. And then actually it looks like the Europeans are dragging their heels and actually organizing stuff together. There's this coalition of many nations, and it could be, as I've reported before, a case of de-individualization where you kind of like don't take control yourself. You're almost like we're responsible as a group to do that, but because we're responsible as a group, no individual then steps up and goes, right, I'm going to organize this. It's like, well, I thought you were organizing that. Yeah, I thought you were organizing that. And in the end, nothing happens. So it could be that kind of situation. Just like someone needs to take charge. Right, let's get this sorted. Bish bash bosh. But I don't know. That's just me speculating there. Now, because ATACMS haven't been given these long range missiles with 300-kilometer plus range, they're not being given by the US at the moment. The idea might be that the Ukrainians are developing them themselves, or something of similar capability. Can the old Soviet S-200 missile become the Ukrainian ATACMS? And we've seen the S-200 being used in a number of places. I don't know if there's any examples here. No, we saw it in Taganrog the other day, coming down. It's got a particular shape to it that's quite distinctive. That means that you can actually spot it if video camera catches the missile coming down. The first assumptions that Ukraine allegedly began to strike with S-200 missiles were made in July after the attack on the Crimean Bridge and Bryansk region, where a video of an alleged fall of one of the missiles shows the tail feathers similar to the missile of the S-200 complex. On July the 28th, Taganrog and Azov were attacked. In the shots of the arrival at the center of Taganrog, the plumage characteristic of the S-200 is again visible. Quote, Western partners say that weapons supplied by them cannot be used on the territory of Russia. We agree and are looking for other possibilities. Remember the modified drones, which twice flew at the airbase in Engels, says ex-spokesman of the General Staff Vladislav Seleznyov. How the S-200 complexes could be reworked and whether they will be an alternative to ATACMS, read the analysis and subscribe to the LigaNet.net channel. Well, that sounds like it would be interesting to read, but there is this idea that S-200s could, these older air defense missiles being reworked to be fired in a surface to surface capacity could be at least an answer. Right, the US has provided $1.25 billion budget grant to Ukraine. I think that might be through the IMF, and I don't know. Some of these things you think it's not like the US is, like I say, taking a trunk full of money out of a vault and saying, "Here you go." there's actually, well, this is coming through this fund, through there, and it's part of actually IMF funding that we blah 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 and all this kind of stuff, and it's got strings attached, etc., etc. I don't know in this case, but anyway, this brings the 2023 direct US budget support to 8.45 billion, and the total US funding since the war started to 25.4 billion. Ukrainian Finance Minister Sergei Marchenko expressed deep gratitude to the US government and taxpayers for their solidarity and unprecedented backing of Ukraine. So, in 2022, 14 countries contributed to the peace program, providing budgetary support for Ukraine in the form of grants, loans, and credit guarantees. So this is a list that's going back though to 2022, I presume, because that's been updated since then. Be interesting to see an updated set of stats for what has been given, because we know that actually Germany's massively stepped up. We know that the EU needs to be involved in this kind of statistic as well. So countries give to the EU and the EU gives to Ukraine, but then countries also unilaterally or bilaterally give to Ukraine. So it's not Germany will be that plus EU, but that's well out of date. I would think so. I'd like to see a more recent statistic. Miami Police Department donated 101 confiscated firearms and 148,000 rounds of ammunition to Ukraine. I don't know how useful this kind of stuff is, uh, whether it's like almost more difficult having so many different types of weaponry. But on the other hand, you know, what I mean, it might be that some of these are quite old. I don't know, but I just think rather than in Ukraine in a war than on the streets of Miami is my opinion there. So sounds good to me. Russian military bloggers write for the first time the armed forces of Ukraine, so this is what I was talking about, are firing the powerful uh, Swedish 155mm Archer self-propelled guns in the Zaporizhia direction. That's a six-wheeled variant. There is an eight-wheeled variant as well. So that is, I guess, good news that they are able to use these now. These are being talked about for a long time. It's good to see them being used on a front line. And Czech supplied Mi-24V Hind E gunships. So these are helicopters that Czechia have given to Ukraine are now being equipped with the US supplied Hydra 70 rockets in N261 rocket pods in Ukrainian Army Aviation Service. We've seen these Hydra that have been adapted and been given a precision capability when fired from the ground. Actually, we've seen them used in the Kherson region quite a bit. So that's good news there. Anti-tank unit of the 25th Airborne Brigade has already destroyed more than 40 pieces of Russian military hardware. This number will continue to increase daily unless the occupiers get out of Ukraine and go home, says this commentary here. But this is quite a cool video, sort of looking at these guys using buggies to get around and do their business. It says our unit carries out missions in the areas that can be targeted by tanks and on the boundaries between battalions, providing support in tank warfare. The unit always accomplishes its tasks, adapting to the terrain and circumstances. We work with anti-tank weapons such as Javelin, Fagot, and Stugna P. During a certain period, we destroyed approximately 6 enemy vehicles in this area of operation. In total, we've taken out over 40 enemy vehicles. I'm personally responsible for 6. That's pretty impressive, isn't it? The destroyed targets included infantry fighting vehicles, light armored vehicles, and a tank. The maximum range we recorded in our units was 5,600 meters with the Stugna P. This is what I reported the other day, that actually Stugna, they're touted as having a 5K range, but actually I've seen footage of them hitting up to 6 kilometers, which, that can make all the difference, that extra kilometer. The maximum range was 700 meters. For the children, he says, tanks burn the best when there are plenty of Russians, he says, so he takes some delight in taking out Russians. Similarly, infantry fighting vehicles, when fully loaded with infantry and going on an assault, can cause everything inside to scatter, including legs and arms there, so pretty brutal. It's magnificent when the trees are decorated like garland. I mean, that's pretty horrific, but that's what these guys think. These guys, like I said the other day, when that Dutch volunteer was interviewed, um, there is a very real sense of retribution for being invaded, seeing what these guys do to their own, like I've already reported in the video earlier today, and then what they do to Ukrainians and what they do in when they strike Ukrainian cities and take out all those civilians for using the missiles that they do. So there's a sense of retribution and satisfaction when they do take out Russians. I talked a lot about dehumanization in war. About it's almost like seeing your enemy as less than human, and that allows you to make those decisions that result in these people dying and whatnot. So over the this is a UK intelligence update saying over the last 2 months, Russia has likely started forming up major new formations to add depth to its ground forces. These include the 25th Combined Arms Army. Since its invasion of Ukraine, Russia has mainly deployed mobilized reservists to backfill established formations, or as part of territorial defense infantry regiments. It has rarely established new all arms organizations such as Combined Arms Armies, which are designed to be self sufficient force. An exception to this was the 3rd Army Corps created in summer 2022, which was generally performed poorly. Russia will likely deploy any new formation as a reserve force in Ukraine. However, in the longer term, Russia aspires to strengthen its forces facing NATO. Without a major new wave of mandatory mobilization, Russia is unlikely to find enough new troops to resource even one new army. I think the Russian army is basically done for 20 years. Like, it's not going to get up to remotely international standards, or to be, filled with enough troops, really, of a skilled enough level to operate functionally for a good 20 years. I think it's been an absolute disaster, no matter which way you look at this war for the Russians. Right. I probably don't need to tell you, but Donald Trump has been indicted on 4 counts: conspiracy to defraud the US, conspiracy to obstruct on official procedure, obstructing or attempting to obstruct on official procedure, and conspiracy to violate the rights of citizens. This is piling on trouble for him, and I think Rudy Giuliani is also in the crosshairs there too. Why I'm mentioning this is just trying to work out what's going to go on in the presidential race. Will he be able to run? What does this mean for Ukraine? My personal opinion is that you would want just Biden to continue. If you considering nothing else, of course, no one does. There's lots of things for American voters to consider, and Ukraine will not be at the top of their list. But as a thought experiment, if it was at the top of the list and it was the only thing to consider, nothing else to consider, then trying to put aside all my biases, because I'm skewed Democrat, right? Not that I get a vote, but I still think if I was trying to be as objective as possible, you would want Biden to remain in place. They know the lay of the land right now. All that expertise suddenly going out the door, and B, you just got much greater chance of having continued support for Ukraine going forward. That's my personal opinion. Trying to work out whether Trump will be able to run or not, I just don't know. It's just an absolute, well, excuse the terminology, but it's a political minefield. Right, here we have another example of Russian tourists being harassed by Georgians. A bus takes Russian tourists off a cruise ship that's taken them to the port of Batumi in Georgia. A group of Georgian protesters greets them with eggs. And I think this is a good place to leave today's news. So and another one. More eggs. Like I've mentioned to you previously, there's the backfire effect. So, will this entrench those Russian tourists more in their position, be more Russian, more pro Russian? Uh, or not, or will some of them have some kind of realization? You know, you've got three coaches here coming through and getting pelted. Will there be some realization that things aren't great and that actually people think we're a bunch of douches, that kind of thing? You know, is that you know, the best result out of this is that they just get a better understanding that even if they think they're right, there are a lot of people out there that don't think they're right, and their place just realizing that there are fewer places they can go on holiday as happily, and that their place in the global community is more precarious now than it was 2 years ago. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate your support. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.